Welcome to Recovering Out Loud podcast with your hosts Anthony and Caleb. The opinions expressed here are those of the individuals and not of any organization. Please help support the show by donating in the link. Enjoy the show. All right, fuck, man. We finally got this going.
I know, bro.
I feel like this has been going on for a long time.
Oh, we've been talking about it for like, 2 months now?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
All right, well, I was thinking, we've been thinking about ideas for a while. And I guess we'll start off by giving our short versions of our stories and go from there. We're learning in the process, but I think the main reason I wanted to start this was, I think I wanted to help people out there that have no idea about recovery, right? Because, you're somebody that came in and you had no idea how to get sober.
Zero idea.
Yeah, so, why don't you talk about, what your life was like in active addiction?
Yeah, just to touch on what you said first, I'm from a small community, right? And, there's, literally, not even 2,000 people where I live. And before I got some help with my problem, I just thought either you did drugs or you didn't do drugs. And for the people that did do drugs and alcohol and had a problem, I thought if you stop, you just stop and life is normal, right? So, which is not correct at all for the people out there watching. I went to a facility and I got some help, and that was my first experience with recovery and some of the education that's out there for us. But yeah, I'm from a small community up north. For people watching to try and make sense of it, kind of near the Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie area. How
far is that from Toronto?
That's a 12-hour drive. It's about 1,000 kilometers from GTA area. So yeah, very cold, small little area. I grew up there. I was born there. My whole family lives there. 80% of my family, grandparents, aunts, uncles. I got a family that's out in this area too. But most of all my family's from Manitouwadge. It's called Manitouwadge.
Not Manitouche.
Not Manitouche. So I grew up there. I'm blessed, man. I have a beautiful family. They spoiled me rotten. They gave me everything a young kid needed. They showed me the ways. My dad raised me to be hardworking, not lazy, and even though I'm still not a very independent person, yeah, he tried to raise me to be an independent person,
Yeah.
But my dad kind of comes from a more harder upbringing. My mom comes from that picture perfect movie upbringing, right? So two very different lifestyles. But yeah, they have a beautiful marriage. They've been together for almost 30 years, maybe 20 something, 30 years. But yeah, I was raised in a good family, man. No problems there. And when I got to I was in school with the same kids my whole life. Maybe 20, maybe I seen maybe in my whole 15 years of education, I might have seen 20 kids go, or new kids. There was never the new kids, you know what I mean? So yeah,
that was weird.
Yeah, no, never new kids. So, growing up, I played sports. I had the same friend group basically my whole life. You know what I mean? And I wasn't like that. I wasn't like that kid that was doing drugs at 12, 13, 14 years old. I started a little bit, I shouldn't say late, because when I got to high school, I started smoking marijuana. That's how it started, right? But you just hear some people, their story started at age of 10, and you're oh my goodness, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that wasn't me. So I started smoking at 14, and then I started hiding it from my parents. I wasn't doing it every day, right? And then by 15, 16, probably grade 11, I started really getting into partying, and it was awesome. Every weekend, right? I was working in a little shop, by making $800 every 2 weeks, in a mechanical shop. And my whole $800 would be gone, man. I remember when I first was able to get a bootlegger and buy my own marijuana and buy my own little, what do you call it?
The paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia, we'll call it. I remember I was I was balling out on that stuff. I was spending all my money on it, and that was kind of when my first taste of oh boy, I might have a problem here, right? And it wasn't even bad at that point compared to what it got to. But that's what I look back on it now that I've been educated about my problem, and I see wow, I had a problem right from the start, right from the beginning, man. Spent all my money on it. I wouldn't think twice. When I was 16, 15, I had no bills. I was living at my parents' house. I didn't have to pay for food, right? So I didn't see the problem in spending all my money on that stuff. And then try to make a long story short, by like grade 12, I was partying, and I got my first taste of cocaine. And being one of the only, I had like one other friend that worked, right? We had a friend group probably like 8 to 10 people, and like all of us, I remember like that feeling of like it being Wednesday. There's a party on Friday, and by Thursday you already got the cocaine lined up, the liquor lined up, and you already got that like that pre-feeling of like as if you already did the line, man.
Dude, I'm getting goosebumps just you talking about it, like the anticipation of the party coming up. It's
Yeah.
like all that you look forward to in the week. Nothing else mattered, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about it. You're excited about it.
So yeah, like I look back on it now, right, and I see where all these problems stem, like how they started, and I realized that like even though it wasn't as bad as it got, I had the problem right from the beginning. So again, that happened. I was partying lots. I wasn't doing cocaine every weekend. Let's say like once a month, twice a month, right? But when I did it. Like I had a strict family. I'd have a curfew at like 1 a.m, and anytime I went out and did cocaine, I wasn't home till like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Doors were locked. So yeah, I at 18, I didn't actually graduate high school. I was like 4 or 5 credits short, but my father he has a spot in the underground mines, and he told me, he said, just get through high school, I'll give you a job, right? So I always had that in the back of my head, right? It's good money, hard work, and that's what a lot of people in my family did. So I kind of looked up to it in a way. So right out of high school, like literally, like I remember like the last day of school, I woke up the next morning for my last day of school. My dad opened my bedroom door and he's like, hey, you have to do a drug test before you start work. And I'll never forget this, man. Like 2 days before we had like the end of the year like bash, like party for school, and I did a bunch of cocaine. And my dad comes in my room 2 days after that, and he's like, hey, you have a drug test to start working for my company. And I was like, oh boy, right? And I didn't know how to tell my dad, so I didn't tell my dad, right? I just drank. I Googled like how to get drugs out of your system.
Oh man, how many people have done that, eh?
Bro, and I hate cranberry juice.
Yeah, it doesn't work, does it?
It worked for me.
The cranberry juice?
Yeah, I went and peed the next day. I passed.
Wow.
And then my life of working started, man. And I got underground. I started making good money. I actually succeeded at it, right? Like I said, I was raised by my father to be a hard worker, wake up early, go to work. Now, I'm not saying I went there and I was an all-star right away, but I fit in. And I remember that feeling too of like, being a young man working with a bunch of older guys who in my eyes were cool. And I felt like I fit in with those guys, right? Because a lot of people were telling me like, yo, you're a hard worker, you're doing good. And that was almost a high itself. So I took it so serious, man. Like I would work so much overtime, work all the time. But that is when I got introduced. Well, let me run it back here. I got into a bad dirt bike accident right around about a year after working underground. In my first year underground, I never did my DOC at the time. I was just doing like other drugs at work to give me energy, right? And I wasn't saving really any money. I was spending like all my money, like thousands and thousands of dollars a month on like stupid stuff, man, like clothes, drugs, alcohol, women, right? I was in a relationship at the time, man, and I treated my girlfriend horribly. Like, I would lie to her, just horrible things, man.
All that behavior that goes along with it.
All that behavior, all that addictive behavior that like, being an addiction, your behavior doesn't just mean doing drugs every day. It's the way you treat people, the way you respect your relationships, having boundaries, letting people do whatever they want and giving people whatever they want, right? That was me, man. So yeah, at about 19, I got into a really bad motocross accident, and I ended up breaking my elbow. I hurt my head real bad. And
you still have that scar today?
Yeah, I still got a scar on my forehead. But yeah, I was like 4 hours away from home. I got into a bad accident. Nobody knew where I was. My parents, my girlfriend at the time. And I woke up on one of my friend's couches, man. And I was like, my arm was snapped and my head was cut right wide open. And then he brought me to the hospital the next day. It was just like, I'll show a picture on the Instagram page of what I look like. And like, we were so messed up, bro, that for like 15, 16 hours, maybe even a whole day, he didn't bring me to the hospital. My friends like sleep it off. And he was messed up too. I woke up, man. I remember I got off the couch and my arm flopped. And it was like horrible. So
how old were you at this time?
I was about 19.
Wow.
My girlfriend brings me to the hospital. My buddy brings me to the hospital. I go there. The doctor is like, yo, you need surgery like now. He's like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Where have you been? Because you could tell it didn't just happen. It'd been a little bit, right? Like some blood was dried up and stuff. And then, that same day, the doctor brought in the first ever 2 Percocets I've seen in my life.
Opiates.
Opiates, man. And yeah, for those who are struggling out there with opiates, man, I pray for you every day because that stuff's not easy, you know.
Yeah.
So it brings me my first 2 Percocets. I had never seen these before, but I had one friend. I wasn't like a good friend of mine, but a guy that I hung around with that did Percocets, and he talked about them like they were like, you know, 2 angels, man. And I understood what he meant when I tried them, because I remember being in the hospital bed, like never been in pain like this in my life. I was so scared because I hate surgeries. My family is like worried sick about where I am, right? Because I hadn't answered my phone in a day. And my friend puts on his social media, he puts a picture of me on the couch. And then he passes out drunk. So there's this picture of me online of me like hurting, you know, like bashed right up. So my family sees that. They can't get a hold of me. It's the whole catastrophe. And I wake up and I'm in this horrible mind state, physical state as well. And then I remember I took those 2 Percocets, man, and like, it was like...
What did you feel? Yeah, what was that feeling like?
I remember someone told me this when I started getting help. They asked me, they said like, what did it feel like when you get high? And I'm trying to describe it, right? And he said, did it feel like the warmest hug you ever been given in your life? And it felt like the warmest hug, man. Like... Yeah. Like God come down and just wrapped his arms around you, bro. Yeah. You know. So yeah, that's what I felt. And dude, I didn't even get my surgery that day. I felt like on such a high cloud. I told the doctor, I will never forget this, bro. I was so scared to get my surgery. I told the doctor, I said, my sister is getting married tomorrow. I can't have the surgery. I'll come back in a week. I do not have a sister watching. So I said, okay. He put my arm in a sling, and I broke my elbow, right? So I needed to get like. My elbow, like put screws and plates in my elbow. And so he put me in a sling. I hopped in my truck and I drove 4 hours back home and dealt with my family situation. But the doctor called, he somehow got my mom's phone number, and he made me come back and get surgery. So yeah, I went home, man. And then from there, make a long story short, you know, he gave me, I think, a prescription for 2 weeks, and it was out in like 5 days. So then I went to that one friend who I knew who did Percocets. And then I started buying them every day. And, you know, months go down the road, I'm doing 2 a day. You know, after a month, I'm doing 4 a day. And after, you know, I'm doing 6, 8, 9, 10 a day. I'm spending all my money, man. Yeah. Like, all my money, Anthony, on Percocet. And then, yeah, after a year, you know, I went to, you know, oxys and morphine. And you know how it goes, bro, right? I don't got to get too specific about that. But it just got worse and worse and worse. And I pushed my family away. My little brother, man, who's my best friend, pushed him away. All that friend group I grew up with, I stopped hanging out with them. Started hanging out with those people that I said I would never hang out with. You know what I mean? I lost like 50 pounds from 18 to like 23. You know what I mean? Just got real sick. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that like all these people in my life, like my family, my friends, you know, ex-girlfriends, they were like telling me like, dude, you are messed up, man. You got a problem. And I would just be like, you guys are crazy. I don't have a problem. I literally thought I was doing so good because I had a job. I thought, you know, my mental state's messed right up. I'm high all the time. Yeah. But I'll never forget that feeling of like, you know, realizing like, whoa, like look at what you've done. And I didn't realize it until I got sober for a bit. Yeah. But yeah, man, that's like a long story short about me. And one thing I'm gonna touch on too quickly is that like one of the biggest motivators for me to do this podcast was like, I feel like in this recovery world, there's not enough young people. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I just, you know, I remember when I first started talking about my problems and going to meetings and stuff, I was like, it's a lot of older people. And no, nothing against older people. They got so much wisdom, but like, I feel like a young man can listen to a young man and relate more. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like if I'm up here talking and sharing my strength, experience, and hope, like I could maybe touch another young guy to get out there and get some help, right? Because this stuff isn't easy. You know, I'm not even talking about the podcast, but just like to actually get help, you know? There's such a better life out there, man. Like, you know, I thought for years I wanted to do a podcast, wanted to move to the city, wanted to do this and that, but I never did it because I was spending all my coin on drugs. Yeah. You know? And now look at us. We're following our dreams now. And, that's basically Caleb in like a nutshell.
Yeah, thanks, dude. I mean...
let's hear about you, bro.
You touched on a lot of that, but... how long do you have now?
I'm at 4.5 months, getting close to 5 months clean, man.
Yeah, almost 5 months clean.
Yeah, bro.
And it's funny that, you know, you mentioned the meetings, and for people that don't know out there, we're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, 12-step programs. Now, I don't necessarily want to make this whole podcast about 12-step groups, but for us, that's the thing that's working right now.
100%.
Right? So that's the answer, the way out, if you will, of addiction. And you know, we'll get into a lot of that stuff as we go on, I think. But I just want to make this first podcast more about you and your story, and then maybe we'll make some more podcasts and bring some other people on that we know in recovery. But you touched on a lot of good stuff there. I want to talk about that kind of like, it's funny that everybody I know that's gotten into drugs or drinking, and you know, just for the record, I was always told that it's the same shit, different trouble, right? Alcohol, gambling, women. We tend to use these things to fix our internal state, right? We grab these external things just to fill this kind of hole that we have inside to make ourselves feel better, because at the end of the day, we don't really like ourselves, right? We kind of dig this hole. And you mentioned you pushed your family away and all this stuff, just to kind of get this good feeling, right?
Yeah.
You know, I was...
this good feeling.
Yeah. And it's like always temporary, right? But at some point it does work. Like the drugs do work.
100%.
Because we wouldn't have started using them if they didn't work, right? If they didn't solve this problem. And the way I always like to think of it is like, it's like there's like this monkey in my head kind of making like a racket, just banging around, making noise. And what the drugs do temporarily, and alcohol, is they kind of just make everything quiet. Yeah. And you can kind of just go,
yeah.
Right? I've heard that at AA meetings a lot, where people are like, this sense of ease and comfort, as it says in the big book here, of Alcoholics Anonymous, this sense of ease and comfort, like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
The bills don't matter. The wife yelling at me doesn't matter. The no job doesn't matter. The fact that I got fired, nothing matters, because I feel okay in my skin at this moment. And I find that what recovery does is it kind of replaces the drugs and makes the ease and comfort come from external, like some kind of spiritual, you know, outside of me path. And in the beginning, it was going to meetings and seeing other people happy in sobriety. And I remember going to the first couple of meetings, because I was forced to go in treatment the first time I went into treatment 10 years ago. I was like, fuck, how all these people are happy. Like they can't be sober. There's no way, right? Like I got to come back and see what's going on here, because there's some kind of trick. Like people are high or drunk here. There's no way. I didn't understand the concept of people being happy without drugs and alcohol. Right? I just assumed that everybody used, but some people could handle it better than me. And I just had no willpower. I was weak, right? That was my first wrong assumption, you know, and there was a lot of wrong assumptions. Talk about more like, what do you like about going to meetings and, you know, this kind of like feeling when you walk into a meeting? What's that like?
Well, first thing I'm going to say about one of my favorite parts about meetings is that, like, bro, it doesn't matter if you're 23 or if you're 73. You and that man can talk about recovery, talk about your problems for forever. Because we all go through that same thing.
There's this feeling that you can kind of relate with, right?
That feeling of like that mutuality, feeling of like, well, we've done the same things. We've been through the same thing. Even it doesn't matter what drug you do, if it's alcohol, drugs, where you come from, what your ethnicity is, none of that stuff. Like, you guys literally can relate about so much. I honestly, man, like, so like I find sometimes, like, let's say because of work, or because, you know, I'm having a couple busy days and I don't get to a meeting, I'll like not even necessarily get into old habits. Well, yes, in a way it's old habits. Like, I'll stop thinking about like the things I need to think about, right? And I'm someone, sometimes I'll lose that humility part of my life of like being so grateful for where I am, you know, trying to help people, you know, the way I talk, the way I think. And I'll go to a meeting, man, and it'll bring me right down to like ground zero again of like, okay, you know, this is what I'm thankful for. This is where I was. This is where my life is going today. And then I leave that meeting of being like you said, it's almost like that feeling you get from drugs, but you're not getting it from drugs. You're getting it from something real. You know what I mean? And it's not like you're going to some 5-hour long meditation and, you know, it costs $100 million.
It's free.
It's free. You know, you go to a meeting and like, especially because I'm not from here, I don't know any of these people. Every time I go to a meeting, man, it's a bunch of people I've never seen before. And you give this person comes up to you, gives you a hug, introduces himself to you.
They genuinely care about you.
Care about you. Remember
because they've been there before.
Yeah. You remember that feeling? I remember this feeling. I thought my drug dealers loved me. You know, I thought
best friends. This guy cares about me.
You know, you go to your drug dealer's house, you dap him up. What's up, bro? You know, here's $100, and he gives you your stuff, and you're like, that guy's the man.
Bro, I made it extra strong. Hey, bro, this is fire. This stuff is fire. It's always the best stuff, right? When you go in there.
You know, but you go into a meeting, man, and the guy comes up or the girl, and they're like, you know, how's it going, man? Everything okay? give you their phone number. Next day, your phone's ringing. Hey, I'm just checking in on you.
Yeah. How you doing? Yeah.
You know, just like real stuff. Everything was so fake, man, before. Even the way I felt, like you were mentioning about like the wife yelling at you. Man, my life was so chaotic before I got help. Like people, like there was a lot of people mad at me, man. You know, some situations with women, like I was not a very good, like I never abused women or nothing like that, but I was like doing lots of sleeping around, sleeping with people's wives, you know, just dirtbag stuff, bro. And I remember like I'd check my phone in the morning, there'd be like 10 messages of like huge paragraphs from people, and I'd be like, you know, get high, and none of it would matter.
Yeah.
None of it. I wouldn't even care. My life would be fine. Wasn't working, had no money, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I would be like, life's great, bro.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the most hard things you deal with when you get sober at first is like all those feelings come rushing in. You're like, whoa, right? But like now that I got, and I don't even have that much time, you know what I mean? But I'm starting to be able to navigate through these things better, right? Like and you deal with things. You ever find sometimes like a lot of things you like, I mean, I live with you, so I know exactly what, I know you're doing this stuff, but like, you know, whether it's like financial situations, whether it's work situations, whether it's like just something simple as like answering emails. These are things I never did when I was high. I didn't care.
Can't even comprehend.
You know what I mean?
How am I going to do this?
So now I actually deal with things. I'm like, you know, sometimes I don't take 1,000 steps a day. Something maybe it's 200 steps, and I'm talking like theoretically here,
towards
right?
like recovery,
towards recovery,
life.
towards your life. You're getting things done.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, we met in treatment, and you know, it talks about in the big book, people, we are a group of people that normally would not mix.
Yeah.
Like I never would have run into you if it wasn't for treatment, right?
Or if we were at some sketchy bar at 2 a.m, maybe a while back, we would have met each other.
Yeah, we would have been friends, but I mean, it wouldn't have been a good friendship, right? Like, and now
fake.
Today, there's, you know, and for guys especially, you know, for women too, but for guys, it's hard to reach out and be like, dude, I'm struggling, man.
100%.
Like I can't stop thinking about using drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, now I'm coming up on 3 months clean and sober, and you know, I had 3 sobriety dates. I've been to 3 different treatment centers, and I've gotten a different experience from each one. But why don't we like talk about like what did treatment and rehab do for you?
Changed my life, man.
You went in there, from what I understand, because I only met you at the tail end of your stay, and I did 2 months, you did 3 months, 90 days. But you know, from what I heard in there was a big transformation, and that's what this thing does, right? It changes us. Like,
crazy, man. Yeah, I went in there and like.
What did you think you were gonna get, and what actually happened?
I'll tell you something funny that I say. I remember because I went to treatment in Aurora, Ontario. And that's like...
It's about 20 minutes north of Toronto, 30 minutes.
Yeah, so it's way up here. And I just remember my brother and my dad come to my house, and they're like, you know, you need to go to treatment, yada, yada, yada. Had that long conversation.
They had like a mini intervention.
Yeah, and I went, man, because I was so hopeless. Like I had... There's nowhere to go from here. Back in my house and get high again. Yeah. Don't have any drugs to get high. So it was like... I didn't go because I was like, okay, I'm gonna change my life.
Yeah.
You know, that was not my mindset.
You were desperate.
That was desperate, man. I was like on my knees.
Yeah.
On my knees, right? So I went there. I did a 10-day detox, and in the first 10 days, like they completely isolate you in a room, and you know, I slept off my withdrawals. Yeah, man, I could like physically. I remember being there. I was like, oh my gosh, and you can't use the phone, so I wasn't contacting my family or nothing. But yeah, for the first month I was in there, man, like I had developed these horrible behavioral issues in like my 5 years of addiction, right? Like not caring about people, having no respect, no man, like just all these things I was raised to do. I lost all of those good,
all the values
and
morals that your family brought you up on.
You know, and I went in there like 145 pounds soaking wet, just a little skeleton sick kid, man. And for my first month, I was very like rebellious in there. I didn't follow the rules, man. I found any reason to not like the place.
Yeah.
You know, this beautiful, you know, private facility. These people are trying to help me change my life. And no, I was like, you know, butting heads with the people in there. You know, there's like chores and stuff you were supposed to do in the treatment center. I wouldn't do them. People were getting mad at me. I didn't care, right? I was, you know, just had that like, fuck it mentality. Like, what are you going to do about it mentality, right? And I really developed that when I was in my addiction. And then, some stuff happened between me and a counselor there, and I had, gotten a little bit aggressive with him and, you know, gave him a piece of my mind, which was not smart to do. And I was in the wrong. He called me out on some stuff that I was doing, right? It was completely my fault. But at the time, it wasn't. You know, at the time, it was all him. And then I woke up the next day and they were going to kick me out of the facility, right? I had to talk with the boss and the owner of the facility, and it wasn't like one of those nice conversations like, you know, you need to stop and change your life. It was not that at all. Yeah. It was like my dad yelling at me kind of conversation, right?
You needed some hard love.
I needed some hard love, man, and I got it. And I don't know what clicked in my head that day, but I was just like, dude, like, you get kicked out of here, you know, what are you going to do? Your parents aren't going to support you. Your family's going to be, you know, pissed right off at you. You're lost. Like, you're done. You have nowhere to go from here. So it was kind of a selfish act in a way. It was like, I don't even know how to describe it, but I was like, I got to do something here, right? Again, I think thankful every single day for my family because they are a huge part of the reason as to where I am today. Yeah. But I thought about them, and they say to do this for yourself, right? But that day I did it for them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I started to change. I was always really rude to people, Anthony. Like, you know, you walk into class one day, like when I say class, like when we were in treatment, we would have like classes, right? And say you walked in one day and like, you know, you had an ugly pair of shoes on or something, I'd make fun of you for it. Or if someone said something stupid, I'd make fun of them for it. I was just a very like chirpy person, right? And I got off on that. And then I remember one of the sober coaches in there, he said, like, why don't you try being nice to someone, help someone? He said, you're a young guy. And at the time, there was a lot of younger people in the facility. He's like, in the younger people, they weren't being rebellious like me, but they didn't take it serious. They were all in there to pass time and get back out, right? He said, why don't you try and talk to these people? Because you can speak, you know, you have a head on your shoulders, try and talk to these people. So I started to do it. Right? There was a guy in there who was a leader for my first month, and he left. So I was like, he told me, like, why don't you try being a leader and helping people in your, you know, because a lot of people in my facility were there for about 40 days. I was there for 90 days. Yeah. And he said, you're here for a long time, so take this opportunity. It'll help you. So I did it. I listened for the first time in my life. I didn't listen to nobody. You know, you tell me to go left, I'm going right. You know, you tell me to get a coffee, I'm getting a Pepsi. Like, no, I listened to nobody, just man. Because, So I was like, I'm going to try to listen, right? So I tried listening, and man, I remember the first time some older lady, she wanted to leave. And like, I mean, I didn't really know her. I had known her for like 2 days, and she was like crying. She wanted to leave. They wouldn't let her use the phone, man. So I went outside and had a cigarette with her, and I talked to her, and I just shared my bit of my story with her.
Experience.
And, you know, and the lady stayed. And she gave me a hug, and she was crying. She said, thank you so much. She told me I was going to leave. That was the first experience I can remember being sober, helping someone, that feeling I got, right? To go back to that feeling of like, like that felt good. That's what I got from that. I was like, whoa. You know, I didn't just sniff a line and get that. Like, I just talked to someone for 5 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah, that happened, man. And I remember, man, I thought I could never have fun unless I was messed up. You know, and fun for me was sitting in my garage or my basement high, 100%. Talking to nobody.
Yeah, I can relate.
But we used to have these fun nights at my treatment facility. Every Friday we would do like a board game. I remember the first time we played a game called Pictionary. You guys probably don't know what Pictionary is. And dude,
you draw on the board and people have to guess.
People guess what you're drawing, right? I remember when they said we're playing Pictionary, I was like, oh my goodness, man. What am I doing right now? Playing Pictionary? Like, and dude, for an hour straight, I laughed and had so much fun. And I didn't realize I was having fun. I was just in the moment, right? That saying of like, live in the moment. I was living in the moment, having so much fun with a bunch of people. I have no idea who they are. I'm just meeting these people in treatment, right? And I remember the counselor said at the end of the game, it's like, see, you guys could have fun sober. And it hit me. I'm like, whoa, I'm just playing Pictionary. This is just the beginning, you know? But yeah, that's like, I had a big change in there, man. And, you know, it does it, but you don't just change and stay changed forever, right? Like, I still have days today where I'm like, oh, you know, you're being cocky, or Caleb, or, you know, you're getting a bit ahead of yourself, buddy, like, relax, right? But I remember, like, I got a piece of humility in there.
Yeah, that maybe there is another way to live.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to be a slave to this drug or alcohol or whatever substance I'm using.
Yeah.
There's a way out where I can live a happy, useful life.
Yeah.
And be of service to people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a good feeling, man. I mean, I think as human beings, that's like our ultimate purpose, is to help one another and continue to like grow, you know, humanity and society, right? Not to get too philosophical, but I think there's a real dopamine hit and joy in helping other people, and 100%. Then, you know, watching them change, right? And I know I've seen you change. Just, we're living in a sober house together now, and you know, it's fun, man. Like recovery is fun, right? And it doesn't matter what age, what race, we all have a common problem, and then there's also a common solution if you choose to live on that side of the fence, right? I've lived, and I'm sure you have too now, you can really say that you've lived on both sides of the fence, right? This kind of dark, gloomy, stormy place where it's like all I care about is getting high or drunk, and my entire thought process and premeditation, all the energy and time you spend on thinking about going to parties, thinking about securing your drugs, your alcohol, and then having fun. Like that's all I cared about. I remember my dad said to me one time, and this really stayed with me. This was like probably 15 years ago. He said to me, Anthony, like all you care about is the next party. That's all you care about. And he was right. I said to him, I was like, Dad, I'm not even having fun anymore. Like I remember I said that. That was the first time I was honest in my addiction. I was like, Dad, I'm not even having fun anymore. I can't stop. And my thing was cocaine, right?
What did your dad say to you when you said that to him?
He just didn't understand it, man.
Yeah.
He was, he just thought I was being stupid. Like, just figure it out. Just get your life together.
Yeah.
Right? And, I was, you're 23 now. I was 23 when I first came in to recovery. And that's all I cared about was getting the next dopamine hit, right? Whatever that looked like. Parties were my life. My idea of fun was like hotel rooms by myself. Right? Because people didn't use the way I used. I never understood. I remember I would put out a line and it would be, twice the size of everyone else's. Yeah. And I hated that feeling of people like, dude, you're going to do all that right now?
Yeah.
And I just remember looking at them and like, oh, dude,
it was like a gut punch.
I don't like this at all, right?
Yeah.
I need to find, and then I went out and I found people that were, quote unquote, worse than me, right? And meanwhile, I was, usually worse than them, right? But I needed to feel better about myself because there was like this deep loathing and self-hatred. Why can't I stop? Why is my life like this? Why can't I hold a job? Why do keep calling in sick for work? I'm sitting in the principal's office in school before that. I never really understood it until I came into recovery and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. For me, all 12-step programs, in my opinion, they work. Whatever works for you works. There's also other means of recovery. 12-step isn't the only answer. I just know that works for me, and it works for the people that I don't know any other way that works. I've tried every other way, but if you can find another way that works, more power to you. But at the end of the day, the only thing that worked for me was complete abstinence from drugs and alcohol, because I could get this clear thought of, I remember too, like, I don't know about you, but I used to wake up some mornings before I was heavy in addiction and have these like dreams and like motivations to like work out and lose weight and get better and get a career and become whatever I wanted to become, right? Like I had these like ideas in my head. I was like excited about life. And then drugs and alcohol just slowly stripped all that away, where I would wake up in the morning and be like, oh my God, not again. What did I do last night?
Yeah.
Who did I piss off?
Yeah.
And you talked about the text message, like, oh my God, I don't remember doing that, right? And then, it just gets worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
And we keep looking for that next high, that next hit. You mentioned you have some really good stories in your addiction, but there was one that stuck out for me, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but that gas station story, I think that was one of the funniest things I've heard in a while. What happened there?
Well, first thing I'm gonna say, it's funny to be able to look back on it now and kind of laugh, but at the time,
in the moment, it was not funny.
It was not funny. Yeah. So I go to the gas station.
And there's one gas station.
Yeah, so let me tell you about this real quick. I'm from a small town. Like, you guys ever watch Trailer Park Boys? It's like kind of like that. Small town, man. Like the nearest Tim Hortons is like 3 hours away.
Which that should tell you everything about it.
Should tell you everything you need to know. Right? And I know everybody there. I've known the guy who owns the gas station for my whole entire life. I know his son. I know his wife. So I go to gas up my truck one day. And keep in mind, this is not a good story here. I shouldn't have been driving. I was up for a few days, right? So my head's like, no. You ever watch the movie 300? When the guy goes, this is Sparta? Yeah. That was like my head, man. Just,
get out of my way.
Get out of my way. So I show up. My truck was on empty, so I put the nozzle in my truck, right? And I put the switch on, and it takes like, 10 minutes, say 5 minutes to fill up. So while my truck is filling up, I'm like, I'll go inside and I'll shoot the shit with the owner, right? Get a pack of cigarettes, get a drink or something. So I'm in there and we're talking about whatever we're talking about. And I forget that I didn't forget at the time. I waited for my truck to fill up. right? And then I was gonna pay for it, go back out, take the nozzle out. So anyways, we talked for like 15 minutes, man. And it's a small town, so it's not like in the city where there's 20 people waiting to get gas.
In line, yeah.
My truck, I could park my truck at the thing and no one's coming away.
There's no one doing lottery tickets and taking 3 hours.
No. So yeah, I go back in my truck after I pay for my gas. I did not take the nozzle out. I hop right back in my truck, start my truck up, blare some music, you know what I mean?
Probably cigarette in your mouth.
Cigarette in the mouth, man. And I drove away with the nozzle still on my truck, and I ripped the nozzle right off the gas tank, man. Yeah. I didn't have no idea. And I live like the town's so small, so it took me like 45 seconds to pull my driveway, right? And I don't know what happened. It ripped off the gas tank, but it didn't stay in my truck. So when I got out of my truck, I remember my gas cap was still open. Like, oh, I forgot to shut my gas cap. So I shut my gas cap. Oh, no big deal, right? And then, yeah, I go back in my house, and like 10 minutes later, there's a knock at my door. I'm like, oh, who's here to see me? Like, no one ever comes and knocks at my door.
No one knocks on the door now.
I go upstairs, and it's the gas station owner. And he's an older fella, man. He's like 7 years old, this short old man. And he's losing his mind on me, man. You ripped the gas nozzle off the gas tank. We're not going to be able to sell gas for the next week. Losing his mind on me, man. And I was like, oh, boy. But yeah, and the stuff that used to happen, bro.
Didn't you shut down the gas station for like a day?
Yeah,
no one could get gas in your town?
Like just picture this, man. Like, you know, if something had happened like that, you'd probably hear it on the news in Toronto. I go on Facebook, and he puts in all capitals on his Facebook page. Gas station your gas pump number 2 will be shut down for X amount of days. It was like a week that gas pump didn't work, man. Yeah. Mom, Dad, if you're listening, sorry I didn't tell you guys that one, but yeah, a lot of stuff that they found out after I got sober, right?
Yeah.
But
I think too, it's important to kind of laugh about this stuff too, because you know, we don't have to live that way anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to hurt people around us if we don't want to. We have a choice now. I have a choice today.
Yeah.
If I want to, when we finish this podcast, I can go out and drink.
Yeah.
I have a choice. I always have a choice. I was taught that by one of my sponsors. I always have a choice to pick up.
Yeah.
But once I do put that first one in me, the choice is gone.
Is gone.
The disease kicks in, and I'm gone. I don't know what's going to happen. And I've proven that to myself, right? I might have some idea of what I'm going to do, but I'm gone at the end of the day. I could die. I could end up in jail. I could end up in a psych ward and back in rehab. And those are, you know, pretty much the 3 or 4 options that are going to happen.
Yeah.
But I have a choice today to pick up that first one. And it's hard sometimes, right? I really struggle with that sometimes, where, you know, there's days where, a drug or a drink seems like a good idea because I don't remember how bad it got. And my brain is tricking me and telling me what I've learned now, that it's going to be okay. It'll be fun, right? But that's not the case. You know, it always gets worse. They call it a progressive disease for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm doing new drugs that I said I wouldn't do before. I'm trying meth. I'm doing benzos, right? And I'm stealing, lying, and cheating the whole way through to get my way, right? So I think it's important to note that, you know, if you're struggling out there, there is a way out.
Yeah.
Right? Just talk to somebody, reach out. I'm going to put some links after this video to some helpful things that keep me sober, some podcasts that I use, and then some other links, you know, that if you're struggling, there's an answer. You don't have to keep struggling like this anymore, right? But
and just quickly, when you said like the hurting people part, man, one of the things I'm most grateful for, one of the best things that have happened to me in sobriety, is when I was in treatment, right? My mom, she struggles with a disease called multiple sclerosis, right? She's had it her whole life. And there's a few things she deals with, but one of the biggest things is she cannot sleep at night. Well, she has horrible sleep at night. And stress, like, she gets it a lot worse than normal people, right? And I remember, well, I shouldn't say I remember, because I don't really remember. I was messed up out of my mind. But my dad would tell me, like, dude, you're killing your mom. You're killing your mom, literally. And, like, I didn't think he really meant it, like, how he meant it, right? I just thought he was yapping, stop doing drugs, right? But I would take that with like a grain of salt. I wouldn't think about it for longer than 2 seconds. You know, my mom was fine, I would think. I remember, because I called my parents. In treatment, we only got to use the phone for 15 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'm going to mention about that is I remember one of my counselors, man, he said to me, I was bitching one day, like, we need the phone longer than 15 minutes, right? Like, this is stupid. I could say 5 words in 15 minutes. And he said, how many, or I forget how he said it, but he's like, how often did you spend 15 minutes a day talking to your mother before you come here? And I was like, oh my God. You know, I wouldn't talk to my mom and dad.
I never answered the phone.
Never answered the phone. I called my mom one day, and this is when I was starting to do a little bit better, right? I was like kind of going through like the first phase of like changing. And the treatment center, my mom is one of those moms, man, emailing the teachers every day. So she's checking on me every day, 5 times a day.
Is he listening? Yeah.
So she calls and she heard I was doing better because she was calling for the first 3-4 weeks, and it was just like, yo, your son's an animal. You need to come get this dog. So she calls and she heard I was doing better, right? And I called my mom that day and she said, it's a nice feeling being able to go to bed every night and like know you're safe, and like I actually get some sleep at night.
That's awesome.
And I was just like, I started crying, man. I was like, oh my God, man. Like my mom wasn't sleeping at night. Like my parents, and they literally felt this, and I thought it was exaggerated, but they didn't know if I was alive. A lot of the time, they come to my house to see if I'm alive. You know what I mean? They would tell me now that I've been in sobriety. They would like go on Facebook to see the last time I was active, just to make sure it wasn't like a long time ago. You know,
and you had no idea about it.
No idea.
You were in it. Yeah.
And the second thing I wanted to mention is that both of us too, because I met your family, man. You have a beautiful family, and you met my family.
I'm blessed.
And we come from these great families. We had no reason, they say, to go out and use drugs. It wasn't like our father was, banging lines in front of us. My whole life, I'd never seen that, man. My parents didn't even smoke marijuana. They were light drinkers. And me and you come from these families, and we ended up like in the dungeons of hell, man. You know what I mean? I remember driving to treatment. I was like, oh my God, there's going to be so many sketchy people there. There's going to be homeless people, all these junkies. I was just like, I didn't think I had a problem. When I showed up to treatment, man, I was the sketchy guy there. Yeah. I was the sketch bag guy. I was like, oh my God, right? But yeah, so I think for like one of the best things this thing has done for me, man, is like I see whether it's a homeless person now or someone that you could clearly tell is struggling hard with addiction, and I don't judge that person anymore. You know what I mean? At all. If I got $2 in my pocket, like I'll go give my $2 to this guy, right? And I never used to be like that. I'd be the guy that would like take a picture of the homeless guy and joke about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like the part that brought humility to my life now, man, like every single morning I have a group of people I text what I'm thankful for. Dude, I never would have done that before.
You didn't even have that word in your vocabulary.
No, right? Man. I took everything for granted. Everything. Money, family, women, jobs, friendships, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I say this to you all the time, bro. Like, I met this guy in treatment, like you said, and like, Anthony was the first guy. I didn't talk about my feelings. I didn't even know what feelings were, man. Like, my definition of feelings were like, you're a bitch.
Yeah, rub some dirt on it.
Rub some dirt on it, right? And like, I don't wake up every morning and cry now and say, oh my goodness, I don't do that at all. But like, when I genuinely feel something, whether it's a bit of stress because of work or I'm dealing with a situation in my life, I would never talk about it. I would just deal with it on my own will. What's Caleb going to do to deal with the situation, right? Now, like, I remember in treatment, man, when we got to know each other a bit better, because this guy was my roommate. And I remember, like, we talk about it. And you would share your, like, I would tell you what I'm going through, and you wouldn't judge me. We would laugh about some things sometimes, but you know what I mean? We'd actually have some serious conversations, man. And then you would tell me, like, yo, when I was this age, whatever, I dealt with this. This happened to me. This is what I did. Yeah. And vice versa. We talk about it, and I was like, wow. And you were the first person, man, that I can remember, besides a counselor, that I ever, like, opened up to about some things. And I was like, whoa, like, that wasn't hard to do. Well, it wasn't easy, but, it wasn't, like, as hard as I thought it was. Yeah. So, like, for any of those macho men out there, trust me, bro, I was a macho man. You can talk about your feelings. And, like, it doesn't just have to mean, like, oh, I'm sad, I'm depressed. If that's what you're going through, let's talk about it. But, like, just talk. Still, even being almost 5 months sober, I still struggle to pick up that phone sometimes and talk to someone, right? Yeah. Sometimes I'll get a phone call after 2-3 days of not reaching out, and it's one of my brothers, and he's like, hey, man, everything good? And I'm like, okay, like, you talk. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And, what it is they're offering you a different perspective. Yeah. You can take it or leave it. Yeah. Or keep sitting in your shit. Yeah. Or you can, choose to try something new and do what they did, right? Yeah. Whether it's going for a walk, or going to the gym, or calling somebody and just getting it out there. Yeah. Because there is a lot of power in, like, hey man, Caleb, I'm struggling today. Yeah. And I'm thinking about drugs. And then you say it aloud, you're like, oh, it kind of loses its power, right? You're like, oh, that's kind of, why am I thinking about that, right? Yeah. And I'm going to be okay at the end of the day. Yeah. Like, I don't have to go and pick up. I don't have to go and use. I don't have to go and start the cycle again, right? Yeah. So I think, that was great, man. Thanks for telling your story. Yeah, brother. I think we'll wrap up with, just this. If you're struggling out there, reach out, do something different, right? Nothing changes if nothing changes. And, there's lots of ways to get sober. This is the way that worked for us, and we'll continue to talk about it and do some questions and Q&A sessions. But at the end of the day, like, this stuff keeps me sober,
Yeah.
and you know, it helps me.
Yep.
And you know, you don't realize that you might be helping someone more than they're helping you sometimes, right?
Yeah,
So,
man.
um,
And just like one last thing I gotta say is if you're out there and you're still using drugs, even if you're sniffing a line as we're watching right now, bro, like, just know, like, first of all, I love you and everything's gonna be all right if you want it to be all right. There's no judgment on that one. But look at your life, man. Look at your life and think about it. No matter your age, where you're at, none of that stuff. Just look like how well are you managing your life right now. I remember when I accepted that first one that says, you know, my life was unmanageable. And before I thought my life was completely manageable because I was able to somehow get high every day. But like completely look at your life. You got one life, man. One life. Like you want to do something special with your life. I know even though the person who's in the darkest spot right now watching this video, they have dreams and aspirations, right? They got things they want to do in their life. But like ask yourself, like, are you really doing it? You know what I mean? Like just how manageable is your life right now? How do your loved ones feel? How do you feel about yourself? You know what I mean? At a certain with the whole like you're responsible for your own destiny, man. You know what I mean? People can help as much as they want to. We can say whatever we want on here. Like you really got to think about like what can you do for yourself to benefit yourself, right? And you got to do that first one, man. You got to really accept the fact that like you need help, and it goes back to the reaching out. You know, whether that's your mom or dad, whether that's your brother, whether it's a friend, whether it's going to a meeting, man. You know, reach out and tell someone like, hey, man, I need some help. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Say, I need some help. Help doesn't always mean here's $1,000 for random. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's about all I gotta say, man. Thanks for watching for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Go follow the Instagram, Spotify, TikTok. Help your boys out, man. It's the first episode of many.
Yeah, like and subscribe, and we'll see you later.
See you later, boys and girls.